The restaurant glowed in shades of amber and gold, the kind of light that makes everything look softer, safer. I've always loved this place. The faint smell of garlic and wine, the hum of conversation, the clinking of forks against plates. It felt warm, familiar, alive. My parents sat across from me, laughing about something my brother said, and Ethan, my husband, looked relaxed for once, his smile easy, his shoulders loose. For a moment, I thought, this is happiness. The kind that feels earned after a long, tiring week. When my mother said, "Sophia, you've been glowing lately. Marriage suits you," I smiled because that's what you do when people want to see you happy. Ethan lifted his glass. "To family and good pasta," he said, and everyone laughed. It was so ordinary, so effortlessly peaceful, that I almost believed the picture we painted. I remember thinking how lucky I was, how right everything felt. Funny how life lets you get comfortable right before it flips the table. Halfway through the meal, the waiter appeared. Polite smile, pressed uniform, holding a single red rose. He stopped by our table right beside Ethan. "Excuse me, sir," he said. "A small gift, from the lady at the table by the window." My heart stumbled. "I'm sorry, what?" I asked, before I even realized I'd spoken. He gestured toward a woman in a red dress who smiled, straight at my husband. And in that instant, the warmth around me turned sharp, like the thorns on that perfect rose. My mother laughed first, a light, teasing sound. "Oh my, you've got an admirer, Ethan." My brother grinned, clearly entertained, but Ethan's face, it lost all color. He tried to laugh it off, muttering something like, "Must be a mistake." I watched him closely, the way his jaw tensed, how his eyes refused to meet mine. It wasn't embarrassment I saw. It was fear. A flicker of panic, so brief most people would have missed it. But I didn't. I felt it, like static in the air. The rose sat in the middle of the table, red and beautiful, daring me to look at it. My mother kept the conversation moving, trying to ease the awkwardness, but I barely heard a word. Every sound, the laughter from nearby tables, the clinking glasses, the music, seemed distant, muffled. My world had shrunk down to that single flower and the man across from me. The man who suddenly couldn't stop fiddling with his napkin. I wanted to believe it was nothing. I really did. But my instincts were louder than my denial. I leaned back in my chair, smiling faintly so no one would see the storm in my head. "Yeah," I said quietly. "Seems like it." My voice sounded calm. Too calm. Inside, I was trying to piece it together. Who was she? Why here, in front of my family? And why did that rose feel like more than a joke? I didn't have answers yet, but I knew one thing for sure. That woman's smile wasn't random, and Ethan's silence wasn't innocent. Dinner dragged on after that, though I couldn't tell you what we ate. Every bite felt heavy, tasteless. My father made jokes about the wine, my brother checked his phone, my mother smiled politely, all of them trying to smooth over something they didn't understand. Ethan laughed at the right moments, but I noticed how his laugh came half a second late, like it had to fight its way past guilt. He didn't look at the rose again, but he didn't push it away either. It just sat there, untouched, but claimed. I studied the woman in red when I thought no one was watching. She didn't look ashamed or flustered. She looked content, the kind of contentment that comes from knowing something no one else at the table does. She sipped her wine slowly, her gaze never lingering too long, just enough to keep me wondering. My stomach tightened with every passing minute. I smiled, nodded, pretended to be part of the family chatter, but my mind was already spinning. I'd been married to Ethan long enough to recognize that brand of silence, the one that hides truth under politeness. When the check came, Ethan grabbed it too fast. My mother thanked him, my father complimented the meal, and we all stood to leave. I forced a smile, clutching my purse like it could keep me steady. On the surface, I looked composed, the loving wife ending a pleasant evening. But as we walked toward the door, I caught one last glimpse of that rose glowing under the candlelight. Beautiful, delicate, and full of thorns. Something in me shifted then, quietly, but permanently. I knew the night wasn't really over. The cool night air hit my face as we stepped out of the restaurant, but it didn't calm me. My heels clicked against the pavement, steady and sharp, the only sound filling the silence between us. Ethan walked ahead, his hands buried in his pockets, pretending to check his phone. I waited for him to say something, anything, but he didn't. Not a word about the rose, not a word about her. The longer he stayed quiet, the heavier that silence became. When we reached the car, I finally stopped. "You going to tell me who she was?" The words came out colder than I meant, but I didn't take them back. He looked startled, like a kid caught sneaking out past curfew. "Come on, Soph," he said with a nervous laugh. "I have no idea who that woman was." I crossed my arms. "She smiled at you like she's known you for months." My voice was steady, but inside, I felt the walls of trust start to crack. Ethan sighed, the way men do when they're tired of pretending to understand your feelings. "You're being paranoid," he said, shaking his head. "It was just some stranger trying to be funny." Funny. That word hung between us, sour and bitter. I stared at him, his face too controlled, his tone too measured. He wasn't explaining. He was performing. And I suddenly realized I wasn't listening for his words anymore. I was watching his fear. I leaned against the car door, arms crossed, my pulse steady but cold. "Funny," I repeated, letting the word linger. "The kind of funny that makes my mother uncomfortable and my brother smirk?" He exhaled, his patience thinning. "You're overreacting, Sophia. I can't control who sends me a rose." His voice was firm now, rehearsed, like he'd practiced that line in his head before saying it out loud. That's when I knew he wasn't just defending himself. He was defending a story. He turned away, fumbling for his keys, pretending to be irritated rather than cornered. I watched him carefully, memorizing every twitch of discomfort, every half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. We'd had fights before, small ones, stupid ones, but this was different. This one had a scent to it, a taste, a temperature. I could feel it in my gut, truth trying to crawl its way out from underneath a lie. My instincts had never screamed so loudly, and I'd ignored them too many times before. Not tonight. He unlocked the car, opening my door like a gentleman, as if manners could erase suspicion. I didn't move. I looked him straight in the eye and said softly, "Then you won't mind if I find out who she is?" For a second, everything froze. His hand lingered on the door handle, his jaw tightening, and the mask slipped. Just a fraction, but enough. That small, flickering hesitation told me everything his words didn't. He tried to laugh it off, but the sound came out thin, fragile, like glass about to crack. "Sophia, you're being ridiculous," he said, his voice trembling under the weight of his own performance. I tilted my head, studying him the way a stranger might study a painting, from a distance, looking for what's missing. There it was, guilt, sitting quietly behind his eyes. He didn't need to say another word. I could see the truth pressing against his throat, begging to be swallowed. The drive home was silent, the kind of silence that hums louder than words. Streetlights painted stripes across his face as he gripped the wheel tighter than necessary. I looked out the window, pretending to watch the city drift by, but I wasn't thinking about the lights. I was thinking about every Thursday he came home late, every business dinner, every tired smile. The puzzle pieces had been scattered for months. The rose just made them fit. When we finally pulled into the driveway, he mumbled something about being exhausted and went straight inside. I stayed in the car for a moment, letting the engine's quiet vibration match the rhythm of my pulse. My reflection in the window didn't look angry, just awake. Something inside me shifted that night. I wasn't going to beg or accuse. I was going to know. And once I knew, there would be no turning back. By morning, the anger had cooled into something sharper. Focus. I made coffee, sat by the window, and watched Ethan leave for work. He kissed my forehead before he went, the same way he always did. It was automatic now, like clockwork, a gesture emptied of meaning. I waited until his car disappeared around the corner before I opened my laptop. If he wouldn't give me the truth, I'd take it myself. Calmly, quietly, without a scene. The restaurant's number was still on the receipt in my purse. I called, my voice steady, polite, the voice of a woman planning a celebration, not a confrontation. "Hi," I said. "I'm thinking of hosting a small family dinner there again. Could you remind me who was working last Saturday night?" The hostess listed a few names, one of which I remembered. Carlos, the waiter who'd delivered the rose. My heart thudded once, low and heavy. I thanked her and asked to speak with him directly. Carlos answered a few minutes later, his tone cautious. I smiled through the phone even though he couldn't see it. "Hi, Carlos, this is Sophia. You served us last night. I'm the one whose husband got the rose." Silence. Then a nervous laugh. "Oh, yes. That was quite the scene." I lowered my voice. "Can you tell me who she was? I think there's been a misunderstanding." What came next didn't sound like gossip. It sounded like truth. Carlos hesitated, the kind of pause that carries weight. "She's a regular," he said finally, lowering his voice as if someone might overhear. "Comes in almost every Thursday with the same man. He looks a lot like your husband, to be honest." My fingers tightened around the phone. I didn't speak right away. I just listened, to his words, to my own pulse in my ears, to the sound of everything I believed about my marriage unraveling in real time. I thanked him softly, told him not to worry, and ended the call. For a moment, I just sat there, phone in hand, staring at nothing. The apartment felt smaller, as if the walls themselves knew. My coffee had gone cold, untouched. I opened Ethan's desk drawer, his usual hiding place for old receipts, and started sorting through the neat pile of envelopes. Same restaurant name, same day of the week, different dates. He hadn't even tried to hide it. Each receipt was a confession signed with his own hand. Each one a Thursday night I'd spent alone, believing his stories. But I didn't cry. I thought I would, but I didn't. There's a point where tears don't fit anymore, where betrayal becomes a kind of numb clarity. Instead, I felt an eerie calm settle over me, a stillness that didn't feel weak at all. It felt powerful. I closed the drawer carefully, straightened the receipts into a perfect stack, and placed them on the desk. I wasn't the wife asking why anymore. I was the woman about to decide what next. I spent the rest of the day moving through the house like a ghost, noticing things I'd never seen before. The shirts she might have chosen for him, the aftershave that suddenly smelled foreign on his skin. Every detail felt contaminated, rewritten by her presence. Yet beneath the ache, there was something else. Precision. I started making copies of the receipts, printing the credit card statements I'd found online. Each document was a thread in the tapestry of his lies, and I intended to pull every single one. By the time Ethan came home, I had everything tucked neatly into a folder. He kissed my cheek, asked about my day, and I smiled. I actually smiled. "Just quiet," I said. "I needed some time to think." He nodded, relieved, never realizing that the woman standing in front of him wasn't the same one who'd left the restaurant that night. Something in me had shifted from heartbreak to strategy. Love was no longer the language between us. Evidence was. That night, lying in bed beside him, I listened to his breathing, steady, practiced, unbothered. I stared at the ceiling, tracing imaginary cracks that weren't there. I thought of the woman in red, her smug little smile, the rose gleaming in candlelight. And for the first time, I didn't feel powerless. I felt patient. I didn't want a scene. I wanted precision. He'd built his lies over dinner tables and wine glasses. I'd take it all apart, course by course. A week later, I told Ethan I wanted to make up for the awkward rose night. I said it with a laugh, light and playful, like I was ready to forget. His relief was almost touching. He kissed my forehead, told me he'd make the reservation, and for the first time, I let him. He had no idea the stage was already set, and that he was walking straight into it. I spent the afternoon getting ready, calm and deliberate, choosing the same dress I wore the night of the rose. Continuity, symbolism, a story coming full circle. When we arrived, the hostess greeted us with the same warm smile. "Your usual table?" she asked. I nodded, and Ethan smiled too, though his looked forced. His eyes darted around the room like someone expecting a ghost. "Relax," I whispered, touching his hand gently. "We're here for family, not ghosts." He exhaled, half laughing, and I watched the tension leave his shoulders. Just for a second. He still believed I was the woman who forgave easily. That was the last illusion I planned to keep. Dinner started the same way. Wine, conversation, smiles that didn't reach our eyes. My parents arrived a few minutes later, cheerful and unsuspecting. The table filled with laughter, but I could feel Ethan's attention shifting, scanning, waiting. When the waiter approached, he flinched slightly, like the memory of that rose still haunted him. I almost felt sorry for him then. Almost, because I already knew who was sitting just a few tables away, and she wasn't there by coincidence. I saw her the moment I turned my head. The woman in red. Same shade, same smile, only this time it wasn't shy. She looked comfortable, seated alone, waiting for something, or someone. My heart didn't race. It steadied. There's a strange kind of calm that comes right before you stop pretending. I lifted my glass and leaned toward Ethan. "Oh, look," I said sweetly. "Isn't that your admirer?" His fork froze midair. For a heartbeat, his face was a perfect blank. Then came the flush, the blink, the stuttered words. I don't think so," he said, his voice barely holding together. I tilted my head, letting a soft smile play on my lips. "Funny," I murmured, "because I asked the waiter, and he said you two are quite the regulars." His mouth opened, then closed again. Across the table, my mother's expression shifted from polite confusion to silent horror. My father looked at Ethan the way men do when they see another man's weakness laid bare. And in that flickering candlelight, everything I'd prepared for finally aligned. The restaurant noise seemed to fade into a low hum. I stood, slowly, lifting my glass so the crystal caught the light. "To honesty," I said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Something this restaurant seems to have seen more of than my own marriage." The words cut through the air clean and deliberate. Conversations stopped. Forks paused. I didn't need to look at him to know his world was collapsing right there, under the glow of a chandelier and the weight of a single sentence. Ethan's hand reached for mine, desperate, trembling. "Sophia, please," he whispered, his voice breaking around the edges. "Let's talk outside." The irony of that, the man who'd hidden everything in the dark now begging for privacy, nearly made me laugh. I looked down at him, and for the first time, I didn't see the man I'd married. I saw the man I'd forgiven 100 times without realizing it. The man who thought my silence was weakness. "You can talk to your date," I said quietly. "I'm done listening." Gasps rippled through the room. My mother's hand covered her mouth, my brother muttered a curse under his breath, and somewhere behind us, a waiter dropped a glass. Ethan's face turned pale, his lips trembling with words that never found air. I slipped my wedding ring from my finger, slow, deliberate, and set it beside the rose centerpiece. It glowed faintly under the candlelight, the last piece of the performance I refused to keep. For a moment, no one moved. The world seemed to wait. Then I turned, shoulders straight, head high, and walked toward the exit. The murmurs followed, whispers mixing with the soft piano music that played on, oblivious. Each step felt lighter than the one before. By the time the door closed behind me, the noise of the restaurant was gone. All I could hear was the quiet sound of my own heels against the pavement, a rhythm that didn't belong to a betrayed woman anymore, but to someone reborn through fire and restraint. The kind of woman who doesn't just walk away, she plans what comes next. The days that followed felt strangely silent, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Ethan called, texted, begged for explanations I didn't owe him. I ignored every message. Instead, I packed my things methodically, drawer by drawer, memory by memory, until the house no longer felt like mine. I left the key on the counter next to his favorite coffee mug and the folder I'd prepared. Inside were copies of every receipt, every hotel booking, every business expense charged to his company card. My goodbye wasn't a note. It was documentation. Moving out was easier than I expected. There was no crying, no screaming, no late-night nostalgia, just peace. I rented a small apartment downtown, one with too much light and not enough furniture. It felt honest, unfinished, but mine. That first night, I opened a bottle of wine, not to drown anything but to celebrate the clarity that finally replaced confusion. For years, I'd been the woman holding her breath while he lived two lives. Now, for the first time, I was exhaling. The next morning, I made the call. "Good morning," I said politely. "May I speak with the HR manager, please?" The receptionist transferred me immediately. My tone was calm, almost kind, as I explained that I was providing some documents that might concern company ethics and expense misuse. The manager's voice tightened with interest. "Mrs. Collins," he said, "thank you for your detailed information. We'll handle it." I smiled, not out of spite, but relief. Justice didn't need shouting, it only needed proof. The news came faster than I expected. A week later, Ethan's company issued a formal statement. Termination due to financial misconduct. Just like that, the man who'd once bragged about being indispensable became a cautionary tale in a polished office hallway. He tried calling again, leaving a string of messages that started with anger and ended in despair. I didn't answer any of them. There was nothing left to say. He had written his ending himself. I had simply turned the page. Then came the final message. "You ruined my life," he wrote. I stared at the words for a long time, not angry, not vindicated, just done. I typed back slowly, each word deliberate. "No. I just removed the perfume and lipstick from the version of your life you pretended to live." I didn't hit send right away. I read it again, making sure it wasn't cruelty but truth. Then I pressed send. That tiny click felt louder than any argument we'd ever had. After that, I blocked his number. I deleted our photos, not out of rage but to make space. Space for quiet mornings, for laughter that wasn't forced. For peace that didn't depend on someone else's lies. My revenge wasn't about destroying him. It was about restoring me. People think revenge is loud, dramatic. But the most elegant kind is silent, patient, and final. Once the storm passed, I began rebuilding. Not the kind of rebuilding people post about online. No new haircuts, no dramatic speeches, just small, deliberate steps. I changed my name back to my maiden one, started teaching part-time again, and filled my nights with books instead of waiting for texts that never meant anything. There was a strange freedom in routine, in the simplicity of owning my own silence. Every morning, I made coffee by the window and watched the city wake up, realizing I didn't miss him at all. My parents called often, worried at first, then proud. My mother said she'd never seen me so calm. "You seem lighter," she told me one afternoon. I smiled, knowing it wasn't just about losing him. It was about reclaiming myself piece by piece. I had given years to a man who couldn't tell the difference between attention and affection. Now I was learning that solitude, when chosen, doesn't feel lonely. It feels sacred. One evening, I opened that folder again, the one with all the evidence. I thought it might sting, but it didn't. It just looked like paperwork now. Proof that I had survived something ugly and turned it into order. I slipped it into a box labeled Past and placed it on the highest shelf. Then I poured myself a glass of wine, raised it to the quiet of my apartment, and whispered, "To peace," and to never mistaking silence for weakness again. Months later, I found myself back at that same Italian restaurant. Not out of nostalgia, but intention. Lena, my best friend, had insisted on taking me out to celebrate my birthday. "Your first one as a free woman," she'd called it. The moment we stepped inside, the familiar scent of wine and roasted garlic wrapped around me. It didn't sting this time. It felt different, lighter, like the air had finally cleared. We chose a table by the window, the same corner where she once smiled at my husband. I smiled too, not at her memory, but at how little it mattered now. The waiter, a new one, placed a single rose in a slim vase at our table. "It's part of the decoration," he said kindly, and I laughed. "Good," I told him. "I've had enough surprises for one lifetime." Lena grinned, raising her glass. "Do you ever think about him?" she asked softly. I thought about the question for a moment, tracing the rim of my glass. "Only when I need to remind myself how far I've come," I said, and I meant it, every syllable. As we ate, I glanced at the rose. It wasn't a symbol of betrayal anymore. It was a reminder of everything I'd walked through, everything I'd chosen not to carry forward. I tucked the stem behind my glass and said quietly, "It started with a lie in a restaurant, but it ended with me finally walking away from the table." Lena smiled, tears glinting behind her laughter. And in that moment, I realized freedom doesn't always arrive with a bang. Sometimes it comes with a single rose, and the strength to leave it untouched.